The man's hands were gripping the cliff tightly. However, the nearly vertical cliff caused his body to keep slipping down. He flailed his arms and spread his limbs, barely managing to stop the slide, but his arms had already begun to tremble. At that moment, the man heard his phone ringing. He tried to reach for the phone in his backpack, but his body started to slip again. The man had to press his face against the ground to increase the friction until his body stabilized. Then he reached for his backpack again and carefully unzipped it. Soon, his hand was inside the backpack, but his body began to slide down once more. The man had no choice but to give up for the moment and struggle to hold himself at the edge of the cliff. Then, the man looked down at the waves below. He calculated the timing of the waves crashing against the rocks and then turned and jumped off the cliff. Although he successfully landed in the water, his waist hit a reef, causing him to lose consciousness briefly. Soon, the man came to his senses and climbed onto a rock. He lifted his shirt and saw the wound on his waist. He tried to move his legs but suddenly realized that his feet were gradually losing sensation. At that moment, the man remembered the phone in his backpack. However, after being soaked in seawater for a long time, the phone was damaged. The man had no choice but to shout for help, but there was no one around the cliff. He had to take off his clothes to bandage the wound first. Then he looked around and saw a small island not far behind him. So, the man dove into the sea and swam toward the island. But the injured man soon lost consciousness and sank to the bottom. He only came to when his feet touched the underwater land. The man struggled to float to the surface, and soon the waves washed him ashore. He wrote a distress signal on the beach, but by nightfall, he still hadn't found any food. The man searched the beach for anything useful and soon found some aluminum foil. He dug a hole, spread the foil inside, and placed it in the pit. Just then, thunder began to rumble over the sea. The man happily opened his mouth, waiting for the rain, but the thunder suddenly stopped. The helpless man could only grab the foil from the pit and suck on it, but there was only sand on it. The next day, the sea washed away half of the man's distress signal. He lost the courage to go on and crawl toward the ocean, soon sinking beneath the waves. However, at that moment, a huge ship appeared overhead, and a diver spotted him. The man was finally rescued.